Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth in the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. Accusation. Pounding the tarmac, she bolted down the garden path like an Olympic champion at the start gun. She quickened her pace to an all-out sprint, whilst the springing, graceful steps of 20 miles earlier had long since disappeared. The slapping noise of her flip-flops resonated around the vandalized walls of the housing estate with a clanging echo. She didn't know where she was, nor did she know where she was heading, but she knew she had to get far away from him. Flashing in her eyes, an image of a wedding dress consumed her thoughts. She wanted to tear it and rip it up and throw it at him. Throw it at the man that she could never marry. For God's sake, I'm only 16. I can't get married, she thought. Tears blinded her, and she turned, running as quickly as her long legs could carry her. She bolted down the alley. The pounding noise of her flip-flops reverberated off the walls of the alley, along with a clanging echo that matched her heart, throbbing inside her chest, filling up with acid. Her legs couldn't go on anymore. There she saw it. A barn. It blossomed on the hill amid the grass and the meadow flowers, as if one day it sprung up from some precious seed. I have to go in there, just for a little while, and I will go back home soon, she thought. Opening the door, the smell hit her first as she lugged open the unwieldy, russet-painted door adorned with its tired hinges that creaked like the moaning of cantankerous old men. Collapsing down, her legs couldn't carry her anymore. They were filled with toxins, lost in the rhythmic percussions of her steady breathing. She closed her eyes and imagined herself in college and getting a degree. However, that dream seemed so unrealistic, invading her steady breaths. A sound of murmuring pervaded the ambiance, and it was coming from outside. Lifting herself up, she carried herself forward and looked out of the cracks in the door. In the middle, a man was begging on his knees. She saw that his face was bearing with the congealed blood, and his clothes were in an utter mess. However, they showed him no mercy. Surrounding him, a tall man was clutching onto his shirt and ripping it apart. In front of him, a much slender man gave him a red eye. His left eye was swollen. He couldn't be seeing a thing out of that, and his face was more purple than brown. She couldn't look. Her eyes widened, and lip trembled. Plummeting onto the floor, the man laid there. He was dead. Calling out from a distance, she could hear a voice telling them to bury him there. Nevertheless, she couldn't see who it was, and couldn't seem to recognize this voice. Just like minions, all the men dug holes with shovels and buried the man, leaving no evidence behind. Tears burst forth like water from a dam spilling across her face. The muscle of her chin trembled like a small child. Salty drops fell from her chin, drenching her kurti. Many thoughts pervaded into her mind. She had never seen these people before, even though she lived in a small village in Pakistan. Going towards the way she came, she ran back home. I can't be here anymore, she thought. Howling wildly, the rain lashes the concrete breeze that made her lose control. She ran through a maze of buildings and winding side streets as the sky rumbled, and heavy rain bounced off the cobblestones. A storm smothered the sun, graying the world around her. Drops of rain beat against her skin like hammers. Reaching home, she ran up to her apartment and banged on the door. Getting inside, she ran to her room and closed the door. Overpowering all her emotions, the face of the dead man haunted her, playing the story over and over again. She fell asleep and let her thoughts turn all her dreams into nightmares. Waking up in the morning, she turned on the news and waited. There is a kind of waiting that feels like gentle, onshore breezes kissing salty stones. Nevertheless, this is not what she was feeling today. The news finished, and there was nothing about this missing man. How strange, she thought. Months go on, and there is no sign of this man. Befuddlement infiltrated into her mind. Who was this man? And most importantly, why was he dead? After months of waiting, she saw it. Sitting there on the sofa, she saw it on the news. It was exactly the same man that got killed, and apparently he was missing. So they didn't know that he's dead, she thought. Her mouth pursed and slightly loosed. She looked up at the TV, her eyes fixed, as if this was the only thing that mattered in this world. She had to go. Running forward, she had to stop. She wheezes as her burning lungs gasp for air. Her legs feel numb and unsteady, painfully sore. Her throat felt dry, so uncomfortably dry. Clothes' long, blonde brown hair were clinging onto the tarmac, no different than if she runs through a rainstorm. Unable to go on, she stopped running, gasping for air, but she knew she had to go on. At the corner of the road, there lay walls as thick as the medieval castle, and windows almost as many. There's no flicker of light within, and the thick wooden doors were closed. Going into the police station, she felt a soft panic growing inside of her. The steps she took were just increasing this amount. It will fade if I back away, but then I have to do this all again another time. It will grow if I let these thoughts swirl into a vortex of stupidity, eating their own tail. Or I can breathe real slow. Let the thoughts leak into the ether and be the real boss of myself, she thought. Approaching the officer, she sat down and told him about what she had seen that night. She told him about the beating and about them burying the dead man. Walking past him, a tall man looked at her, and suddenly she remembered him. It was the same man that clung to his shirt that night. Getting up off her seat, she pointed at the tall man. Sweat trickled down her face and etched marks onto her skin. But she had to do this. Miss, I think you are getting a bit hysterical here. This man works with us, and he would never do such a thing, said the officer. Whist. He examined her up and down. He couldn't understand her. She looked like she was telling the truth. But Hassan couldn't have done this. I do trust him, thought the officer, and he was part of the commander league, and is soon to get promoted into officer. Telling her to wait in the courtroom, he dismisses her so that he could talk to other members of the department. Just stepping into the courtroom is making her breathing rapid and shallow. She can feel her pulse pounding in her temples. It's a relief to get to the chair. Otherwise I would have tripped, she thought. Now, only silence lingers in the air. She shivers in the claustrophobic common room and waits for the signal. But a small sigh of anxiety leaps out of her mouth. Tersely, her eyes flicker to the building's whist. She bit her nails to the core, beckoning her to come in. The same officer takes her back into the office. However, they go further in, and it's like nowhere she has actually ever seen before. The fear sits on her like a pillow over her mouth and nose. Doubting her decisions, she tells herself that she had made the right decision. Once again, fear found her. It spoke to her in its cackling voice. It told her legs to go weak, her stomach to lurch, and her heart to ache, as that is what happened to her. She knew she had to keep going, because the truth was just seconds away. Stepping into an exquisite office, she could see the posters hanging and the files stacked up neatly. Getting introduced to the other officers, she sat down, and in the process, she saw the slender man and recognized him immediately, because he was the one who punched the dead man, and instantaneously, she got off her seat. This is the man who punched the dead man, laughing hysterically. All the officers got up off their seats and surrounded her, just like they did with the dead man. The officer who she met first started talking. I believe that it is you who killed him, said the officer. Isn't that right, Commander Abad? Yes, replied the commander. The voice sounded so familiar in her head. But why she thought? Then it clicked in. He was voice who told them to bury the dead man. Feeling an overwhelming feeling of disgust, she stood up and went towards the commander. You did all of this, she snarled. No, I didn't. Officers, can you please put her behind bars? "And that is an order," replied the commander. Locking up her hands, the officers grabbed into her shoulders and took her away. Trying to justify her case, she had no luck. The constricted feeling grew inside of her, as if she was strangled by just the air about her. She glances upward to the surface, and her heart rate rises. The voice of caution whispers softly, not to rise so fast, but it can't break through the scream for unfiltered rays and fresh air. From the moment she saw it, it repulsed her. These walls cannot hold a prayer, nor can hold a spirit. And I belong here, she thought. Surrounded by 4 white walls, there was nothing else to do but stare at them, to look at the paint that had started to chip off as time passed, or gouged by other prisoners. Anything to pass time, slowly going mad, theorizing absurd meanings from the wall's blank stare. And this is what I would be doing here, she thought, getting thrown into prison. She screamed and shouted like there was no tomorrow, and flung her arms across the cell. I can't stay here, she thought, and not for something I didn't even do. I did not kill the man. It wasn't me, she shouted. But no one heard her. No one ever did. Murder in a dream. Halvar sat in his office, browsing the police file of suspects and cursing his brain for not remembering anything regarding the incident. The doctors told him the blow to his head was severe. It gave him a concussion, after all, and that it might take time for his memory to come back. If it did at all. Hall, without turning his eyes from the computer screen, he waved a hand. "Come in, Siegfried." His assistant walked into the office, placing a hand on Halvar's shoulder. "How are you? Still can't remember anything," he said, scanning the faces of every known criminal in Norway. He recognized a few of them, having captured them himself, but none rang a bell as to whom might have killed 2 of his friends and placed one in a coma. "He's got to be here somewhere." "Hall, you should rest," Siegfried said, placing a cup on his desk. Steam rose from it, spreading an invigorating scent of coffee. "We are looking into every possible avenue. I have to regain my memory," he said, scrolling further. He had to. It was the only way. He must have seen the killer just before the hit on the head knocked him out cold. His mind held the only real evidence they had, the only evidence to help turn suspicion off of Halvar himself. Siegfried sighed and retracted her hand. "We talked to Olaf, the studio owner, again. He said he left the place early that evening and didn't see anyone but you and your friends coming in. Nobody else was scheduled for practice either. The single security camera caught no one else entering the building. That camera's position is awkward," Halvar said, rubbing his eyes. He hadn't slept in a day. He didn't like what sleep brought. The killer could have entered through the back or by the window. "Did Olaf tell you about his back door? How he's too cheap to have it repaired? Anyone could enter. In fact, could the man himself be responsible? He did complain often about the noise of Halvar and his band playing, even though they paid to rent his studio for practice. Hall, I can't imagine how hard this must be for you. I know how close you were with them, how much music meant to you. I hope that Bjarka makes it, and I hope you get some rest. Halvar sighed and listened to Sigfrida's footsteps leaving the office. The cup of coffee rested on the desk, smelling heavenly. He turned to say thank you, but his assistant was gone. Instead, he noticed the pictures on the office walls, his formal detective license, a photo with the whole police department for Christmas 2 years ago, and a framed picture of him and his 3 friends playing live at a local festival. 2 of them were dead now. 1 in a coma. The result of some lunatic bursting into the studio and killing everybody. Halvar himself survived by sheer luck, it would seem. I'll find out who did this, he thought, turning back to the screen. And no law or moral code can save them from me when I do. He spent the rest of the night searching through the files, as well as his memory, both seemingly void of the information he sought. Eventually, sleep caught up with Halvar, and with it came the nightmare. Each night since the incident, he had been having roughly the same dream. It was almost as if his mind was trying to tell him through dreams what he couldn't remember consciously. Halvar got to relive the murder of his friends every night for the past 2 weeks. He got to see every bloody detail, but never the killer's face. That detail always eluded him, and with each dream, he thought he was getting closer to the truth. Each time, the nightmare would reveal a bit more of what happened. That was if his mind wasn't just making everything up out of trauma. In the dream, he was often in the killer's shoes, after all. But he could never see his face. This night, the dream started as usual. Right in the middle of it, and from the point of view of the killer. Halvar saw himself as the murderer, picking up his guitar and crushing his friend's head with it. They were in the middle of practice and were stunned at the sudden outburst of violence by the intruding killer. Before anyone could react, Halvar smashed the heads of all 3 of his band colleagues with his own guitar. Then the dream shifted, where he could see outside from himself, how he got hit on the head too, by a figure without a face. The prosecutor then ran away, and when Halvar wanted to follow, the figure disappeared into the shadows. Halvar woke up, sweating and breathing heavily. He looked around and noticed he had fallen asleep in his office. The place was dark, no light coming from the hallway. Everyone must have left already. He grabbed a pen and paper and wrote down everything he could remember from the dream. recording every detail. The drawer by his desk was filled with accounts from his dream, and he used them to correlate the event, searching for consistent patterns and hints. As incredible as it seemed, his dreams were the only clues he had. But he couldn't share them with his colleagues. They would never take it seriously. The killer used my guitar, Halvar murmured, comparing tonight's dream with the others. But the last thing I remember was playing on my guitar. Then, nothing. So, whoever did it, I must have trusted them to let them have my guitar. The evidence found at the crime scene clearly pointed at Halvar's guitar as the murder weapon. It had blood and tissue of all 4 of them on its body, all found on one side, suggesting that the killer used it as a club to repeatedly strike at each one. The guitar's body was solid steel and hard plastic, and it cracked under the brutal hits, but did not break apart, surprisingly. So the killer must have known how strong the instrument was, so he could perform precise strike with it and not have it break in the middle of his assault. That would create an opening for the others to defend themselves. The only person that Halvar would entrust his instrument to, and who would know so much about it, other than his band friends, was Olaf himself, the studio owner. Halvar even once took lessons from the man, who showed him a few tricks on the guitar from his heyday as a roadie. It wasn't rational to think that Bjarka would take the guitar, kill the other 2, attempt to kill Halvar, and then knock himself out. How would he do that? And it was just as absurd to think that Halvar himself did it, as was the unspoken suspicion. How would he swing the guitar at himself, knocking himself out with it? The angles didn't match, but the blood and the concussion did. Somebody else must have been present there that night, and the more Halvar thought about it, the more he suspected Olaf. The studio was his. He had access to the camera. The band knew and trusted him. He did complain about the noise, but was that reason enough to attempt a quadruple homicide? Or was there something else? A form of jealousy against Halvar and the band? Olaf did say that he never had a chance to be in a band, but that it was his greatest wish. Halvar checked the clock. It was something past 3 a.m. He considered, looking at the photo of him and his friends. Then he left his office. Olaf's house was next to his studio. It was part of the same building complex, just on the other side, so the owner had privacy as well as quick access to the place. Halvar sat in his car, parked outside the man's house. There was a light turned on inside. Olaf was the one that found us, Halvar thought. He came into the studio and called the police. In the report, the man said he had heard shouts and how the music suddenly stopped. So he had gone to check. The more Halvar considered, the more sense it made. The man pretended to have stumbled upon the murder scene, to have an alibi. Halvar waited in his car, considering whether he should confront the man, considering if he could even do it. As he waited outside of Olaf's house, the pain in his head from the blow returned. Halvar took some painkillers and watched the window, wanting to catch Olaf in some act that would rat him out in a whirlwind of thoughts, and with a headache pounding. Halvar must have fallen in a pill-induced sleep, as suddenly his mind was back at the incident. This time, he saw more of it. "That sounds terrible, Hall," Bjarke said, grimacing on the drums. "Are you sure you can play the guitar, mate?" Halvar ignored the remark and focused on playing the solo. They were working on a new song, and it was a pain to get it right. "Sounds to me like he's butchering somebody," Damus, the bassist, commented. "Must be the stress at work, I reckon." They laughed. Typical guy talk. Halvar tried his best, but failed. His fingers were just too slow. The solo too technical and complex. His mind was sluggish, indeed from stress at work. There was a dangerous killer on the loose, and they had finally gotten a lead. Halvar just wanted to relax and let go for a few hours with his buddies. But all he could think of was the brutality of the recent murders. "Hey, we're going to get something to eat," Bjarke said. "You want something, Hall?" "No," Halvar said. "I'm good." He just wanted to get the damn solo right. "All right then," Bjarke said. "But don't you try and steal my roles when we come back." They left. Halvar kept practicing. Then Olaf entered the studio. "Hey, mate," the older man said, wearing his long gray hair and tail. "Sound like you're having some trouble." "Yeah," Halvar said. "I can't do this transition here. It's too fast for me." Halvar showed what he meant by playing the part at half speed. Olaf nodded. "I see. Can I try?" "Sure," Halvar sighed. He handed the man his guitar. "Knock yourself out." "I'll knock you out with my veteran skill," the man said, and took the guitar. The dream then changed to Halvar being in the killer's shoes and butchering everybody, until seeing himself in third person again, being hit by some man with no face. Halvar ran after the man, and this time he caught him in a corner. The man had long hair. Halvar jolted awake. He was sitting in his car, parked outside of Olaf's home. The light in the house had turned off. "It's him," he thought, breathing heavily. He did it. Halvar got out of the car and walked to the studio entrance. He had the key, as he and his friends were regulars. It was the little hours of the morning, and there was nobody outside, not even a stray dog. Halvar unlocked the door and removed the police tape, entering the crime scene. He knew that the studio and Olaf's house were connected by a passage for practicality. Halvar used the light on his phone to make his way through the dark interior. If it really was you, Olaf? Halvar hurried through the passage, entering the man's living quarters. He'd been there once or twice when Olaf invited them over for a drink. Building his alibi, plotting, even then, Halvar crossed the living room and climbed the stairs to the man's bedroom. He didn't think of what his plan was. He just wanted to have a look at the man, to see his murderous face. As he came to the bedroom, where he saw the light coming before, Halvar paused. He heard weeping from inside. His heart pounded like a drum, and he burst into the room. Feeling guilt for what you did, the man, lying under the blankets, jumped up in shock. Halvar turned on the light and noticed he had taken out his gun on instinct. Olaf gazed at him with wide eyes, red, as if from crying. "What? Don't deny it! You did it!" Halvar shouted, his hand trembling. "I saw you! It was you!" The man's face was twisted in a mixture of shock and fear. "What are you talking about? I saw you in my dream," Halvar said. "You took my guitar, and..." The man was crying. There were candles placed on his windowsill, alongside pictures of Halvar and his friends. The two that had been killed had a rosary around them. He was grieving. "What's all this?" Halvar asked, pointing at the pictures. "They were my friends too," Olaf said. "Your band reminded me of when I was young." His gaze focused on the gun in Halvar's hands. "You think I did it?" It wasn't a question, but a statement. One in which Halvar wasn't so sure anymore. He looked into the man's eyes and saw sadness underneath all the shock and betrayal. "I can't prove it, Hall," Olaf said, sniffing. "But by God, I'm not the man you should be pointing that gun at." "Who then?" Halvar shouted. "Who did it? Who killed my friends and nearly killed me?" He pointed the gun at the man's head. Olaf began weeping. "The guitar was in your hands when I found you." Yes, the killer wanted to confuse the forensics by framing one of us. No one else came or left the studio. "Hall, what are you saying?" Olaf glanced at the gun again, then at Halvar. "Are you here to kill me too?" Halvar balked. Olaf pissed himself, a dark spot appearing on the bed sheets. The man was genuinely afraid of him. Halvar suddenly felt deep shame, and he lowered the gun, running out of the room and out of the house. "No, it can't be," he thought. If Olaf didn't do it, who then? He started the car and drove back home, where he took a bottle of scotch and began drinking. He demanded from his mind to remember all of it, to remember things clearly, without dreams and illusions. His head began hurting, but he didn't take the pills. They would only distract his mind. Halvar emptied the bottle and paced around his room until he collapsed in a corner and wept for his friends. Once again, sleep took over, his body and mind exhausted. This time, the dream picked off as his friends returned with the food. "Where have you been?" Halvar asked. They were gone for nearly 2 hours. Bjarka giggled like a schoolgirl. "We went to get food." They all had red faces and were snickering like teenagers. "Have you been smoking weed?" No, Dama said. They snickered some more. Halvar sighed. "We were supposed to practice tonight. You should chill, Detective Oyolf," their lead singer said. "You can't play that guitar anyway." He turned to the other two. "Hey, maybe we should cut his hair. If he can't play, then he's not a true metal fan and shouldn't have long hair." The three laughed, obviously talking gibberish, but Halvar, being frustrated by his stressful job, having to deal with murderers and psychopaths all day long, just wanted to lose himself in the music with his friends. But for some reason, couldn't get the creative juices flowing, and had enough. Something snapped. He grabbed his guitar and began playing. The guys turned to him. "Whoa, look at Hall. He's on fire." Halvar played the solo with fury. He struck every note on the spot. "Yeah, man, that's the thing." Then he came to the hard part. He followed Olaf's instructions and sailed through it, racing to the finale. "Seems Hall's been practicing while we were smoking." Halvar's muscles tensed as he got to where he always failed. He struck the notes one by one, the pick flying over the strings. But his fury was too much. He broke a string, and the guys giggled. Halvar smacked Bjarka straight in his laughing face with the guitar. The man fell over like a chopped log. Then he hit Damus, who was too stoned to register what was going on. Halvar repeatedly hit the man's head until it cracked, and the guitar strings vibrated from the impact, playing a sinister echo. Olaf wanted to run away, but Halvar chopped him down by hitting his side first, and then smashing the man's head. Breathing heavily, feeling all his frustration boiling in him, Halvar screamed and headbanged into the guitar's body repeatedly until he collapsed to the floor, unconscious. The dream shifted outside himself, and he could see Olaf stumbling upon the aftermath. Mortified, Halvar jumped up on his feet as the doorbell rang. His fists were clenched, as though he still held the guitar, and he breathed heavily, confused. He was at home. He just woke up from a dream. Someone was at the door. Did I really kill them? Halvar ran a hand through his sweaty hair and walked to the door. He took one deep breath and opened it. It was Sigfrida, with two other officers by her side, Halvar's colleagues. "Hall?" she said, her voice painful. "Yeah?" he groaned. Bjarka woke up. "We have some questions." Witness, she saw him. She saw him get killed. She saw the life drain out of his eyes. She heard his screams of pain. She heard the footsteps of the murderer as they ran away. She felt a tingly sensation course through her. She felt a tight knot form in her chest. She witnessed it all, but no one believed her. Not a soul, but she knew it had happened. Her eyes couldn't have betrayed her. She wasn't dreaming, nor was she hallucinating. The rasping of the man's final breaths and the crimson blood were all too vivid for it to be a figment of her imagination. She was there. She was watching. She was witnessing. She had approached the body, hands trembling. The man lay in a pool of his own blood, the beneath her feet, his body peppered with bullet wounds. His glassy eyes were rolled back, showing only the bloodshot sclera of his eyes. Her fingers were numb as she had dialed the number of the police. Her breath was shaky, and her voice was uncertain. She told the officer on the phone what had happened. "May I ask what your name is?" The officer had questioned. She responded softly. A moment went by. Her eyes widened as the officer started to laugh. "Nice try. Don't joke that much. We all know murders are implausible." The officer had drawled before ending the call. The phone fell out of her hand and landed with a thud on the ground. What was the officer talking about? She clutched her heart with both of her hands and fell to her knees. What is going on? Her head was spinning. The ground around her started to spin as well. The lifeless body was still in front of her, her clothes and hands now soaked with blood. No. Something was wrong. Something was missing. Why did the officer hang up so abruptly? Why was the officer so ignorant? She stood up and started to walk away from the body. She needed help. She needed to ask someone else. As she turned around, she saw a young man walking by. Her feet dragged her towards him. "Please help! Please help me!" Her cries were loud, and she collapsed onto her knees. The man immediately turned his head. "What's wrong?" he asked, his eyebrows cocked in annoyance. "Please, there has been a murder. Someone has been killed. I saw it all," she begged, her voice desperate and cracking. The man's eyes lingered over her for a moment. He scoffed. "This isn't funny. Joking about death is despicable." He shook his head as he walked away. "Please," she called out weakly, grasping for the man's hand, but it was out of reach, and her hand fell to her side. Tears streamed down her face. They tasted like salt and regret. "Stop. Stop it. Stop crying." She kept scolding herself as she slowly stood up. "Stop being weak. Make them believe you. They must believe you." She hurried back to the scene of the crime. The knot in her chest tightened even harder each time she saw those lifeless eyes. It was as if they were chiding her, tormenting her. She grabbed her phone from the ground, making sure it was still functional. She wanted to call the police. She should call the police. But what if she got in trouble? What if they didn't believe her again? She shut her eyes as pain filled her body. Her words had failed her once again. Her mouth refused to open, refused to fight back. How weak she was. She crumbled to the floor in tears. After all, that was what she was best at, crying. All she could do was cry. She couldn't even stand up for herself, couldn't even prove something. and she hated herself for being so useless. Her mind was swirling with thoughts. She couldn't swallow, nor could she speak. Her throat was dry and hoarse. She still knew she wasn't dreaming. This is real. She is real. It had to be real. But why didn't anyone believe her? Why was she never given a chance? Her breathing started to slow down. Her tears lessened. What if it is a dream? But in my dreams, who am I? Where am I? Her reality felt distorted and warped. Nothing seemed real, yet nothing seemed fake. She reached up, trying to grasp something, trying to find something tangible to provide her some certainty. Maybe she was nothing. Nothing at all. Maybe she was as thin as air. No, thinner than air. As unreachable as the heavens. As unbelievable as the gaping chasm of hell. No, no, she had to stop. No, she knew this was real. She couldn't push the truth away. She still had to face the truth. Truth is something no one can evade. What was wrong with these people? Were they just merely stupid? Or oblivious? Or did they just not care? Why did they not believe her? What had she done to make them so against the thought of murder? She had so many questions, but no answers. But there was only one way to elucidate these questions. Slowly, she dialed the police again, with trembling, frail, bloodied fingers. They picked up. "Hello? I'd like to report a murder." She begins once more, telling her story. "All right. What's your name, miss?" the officer asks. But before she can respond, the man cuts her off with a chuckle. "Just kidding. We don't need your name for a prank." She opened her mouth to protest, but the call ended. Slowly, she pushed herself up, wobbling a bit. She took a moment to stabilize herself, then inhaled sharply. Her eyes were closed, and her face was pointed towards the blue sky. Her eyes slowly opened after a brief pause, glimmering under warm rays of sunlight. "My name," she began quietly, swaying gently with the wind, "is Elora Bathory." She giggled, then disappeared into the shadows of an alleyway, twirling a gun in her hands. Fall of the stars. The heavens glittered with stars as the man silently drove over dirt and gravel. The 1,000 twinkling eyes mocking his desperation, muttering a curse under his breath. He slowed down at the rusty security gate at the entrance of the abandoned mines. To an ordinary person, it would be a half-broken gate, with just a couple of night guards sleeping their shift away. But then again, the average person wouldn't notice that the old equipment was strewn about almost too cleanly, or that the uniformed guards lacked an identity or a logo, or how a cold eye glinted from under the angled cap. A sleek gun pointed at any approaching vehicle. Private security. Good. He smiled. He'd expected nothing less. He rolled down a window and casually brought up his right hand to scratch his stubble, flashing them the tattoo on his arm. One of guards came over to inspect it, shining a flashlight right in his face. Satisfied, he nodded to the other one, and the gate opened. The newcomer growled at them as he drove past. The guards didn't blink. He took the car to the mouth of the mines and parked it aside a vintage piece, tossing the keys inside when he got out. Won't be getting out in this ride, that's for sure. He took one last look at the night sky. The stars still winked at him. I'll show you, you damned twinklers, he thought. And then you and your glowing arses can collectively burn the fuck out. He walked in and took the narrow elevator down, fixing a crick in his neck to look at the small black camera from the corner of his eye. The caged door opened into a tunnel entrance sealed long ago. Dim light and vulgar music blared from within. The tunnel widened into a narrow hall within, a despicable den of sin. Sellers had set up their wooden stalls on either side, sporting wares of all kinds, and catering to the needs of anyone bold or foolish enough to venture within. A place fit for the lowest of low-life scum, the kind who'd kill their own mothers for the right price. Everything in the hall was as good as Eden's forbidden fruit on earth, attracting a number of fools who'd end up unconscious in dirty alleys, pickpocketed at best, missing an organ or an appendage, if not sporting a slit throat at worst. The market and its dealers had been thriving in the sealed mine for almost a decade now, and he had no doubt that even the poorest of these merchants could have half the law enforcement in their pockets. He grunted. Hell, half the buying and betting crowd out here was law enforcement. Drugs, flesh, poison, weapons. They themselves would know where best to find any product being sold in the dark hall. The man sighed and jammed a hand in his pocket, pulling out a pack of gum. He looked it over with a frown and popped one in his mouth, tossing the rest in a makeshift stall with a wink at the seller. Let him pore over hours, wondering what's so special about it. He allowed the thought to bring him a dry chuckle, visibly relaxed now. He cleared his thoughts and covered the tattoo on his arm, lest it be discovered by someone who carried one of its counterparts. He'd thought about this evening too much to spend it in a petty black market fight, ignoring the purrs of a woman offering him the finest opium and a merchant sporting priceless stolen jewels. He made his way to the guarded room on the other end, where once again a discreet flash of his ink admitted him within. A flash of white greeted him on the other side. White tiles decked the room, save for the ceiling, which held a long mirror across the length of it. Across the table from him sat a red-faced man, puff of smoke, cigar in one hand, and a wicked blade in the other. A host of monitors beside him. Eye of the market. He leaned forward with his mouth split in a grin. Rivulets of sweat running down his temple into his short, cropped white hair. Welcome, my friend. Mr. Rasut, I presume? I'm Gvadiskvi. We spoke via our mutual contact, who sadly passed away today. He took his visitor's hand, shaking it and nodding. Tragic, really. But you know how it is. I was hoping you'd stop by this week. Give us a chance to talk in person. Yes, a conversation has been long due. The man called Rasut replied, pulling his hand back. He remained standing. Now, my friend, we are friends, yes? I would offer you a cigar, but unfortunately, I do not yet know if you are a friend. Let's save the cigar for later, then. A question for now. I heard from our friend Rihaka you were taking an interest in the pits. You ask many questions, my friend. I must know now, because I dislike having to answer so many questions. Do you intend to partake in any way at all? Place a few bets. Maybe indulge yourself in a match? Perhaps you'd like me to fix one for you. If only you're first to get you a little start. Say so. And we have a deal. I don't want to place bets, Gvadiskvi. His host's eyes narrowed, his smile faltering. Then you will understand. There are steps to be taken. We must be cautious about our little venture. You misunderstand, friend. He spat with a smile of his own. I wish to fight in the pits. The red-faced man barked a laugh, hurling his cigar across the room. Well then, my friend, we must drink to that, he shouted. I knew I liked you the moment you walked in. He poured out a strange green liquor in glass mugs kept behind his desk. Come, Mr. Rasut, we drink to victory, to living forever and battering one's enemies to death. The man called Rasut raked a hand through his dusty hair, clenching his fist at the drawn-out conversation. I do not drink before a fight. I will, however, take a whiff of your finest snow. It is a cold night, Mr. Rasut, and you are a bold one. He sniggered. My new friend, a man of taste. The man called Gvadiskvi obliged, immediately sending for his finest of the drug. He invited his guest to sit across him and talk. Come then, tell me. He grinned. What brings you here? Rasut tilted his head, starting. He was cut off. Please, do not insult my intelligence. I'm curious. The other man leaned forward. I truly am. Why would a man like you resort to this? He stared across the table, icily. You don't know me. Don't pretend to. But surely someone such as you would have noticed the shadows trailing you, yes? A giggle. They've been watching you. The way you walk, the way you talk, the much concealed desperation in your eyes. Maybe I have a death wish. But that's not the half of it, my dear Mr. Rawsuit, is it? His watery eyes gleamed, sending a shiver of revulsion down the addressed man's spine. Having a death wish doesn't have to be personal, he said quietly. Oh, but coming here always is. His drug came, and he consumed it, courtesy of the house. He rolled his neck, grasping at his colliding thoughts and the clarity he now had. He pulled out the battered old pocket watch. A half hour still remained before he'd fight. The man called Rawsuit suddenly realized that he was talking and stopped, visibly shaken. He found himself staring across at his half-witless host, who beseeched him to continue. You were at the bit where you had the epiphany after giving up your old ways, when the fighting was over. Go on then. He considered for a moment, then shrugged. No harm done. Screw it. It wouldn't matter after tonight, anyway. When it struck me, he spoke through the piece of gum still in his mouth. How much the stars and I are alike. Gvadiskvi hummed in appreciation. How poetic for a man of your bearing. But do tell, how so? It's silly, really, but also true. He snorted a scoff, waving his hand airily. When they die, it's got to be a cosmic carnage, or no one knows cares, because otherwise no one would know when they die. The other man spoke through a puff of smoke as he lit another cigar. Much like battle veterans and mercenaries, such as yourself, Yes, and the natural way is too mundane. He tasted the word on his tongue, and how morbid it felt. So, I thought, why not die in a carnage and make people care? Care? Gvadiskvi went silent for a long moment. Do you truthfully think the people enough to place bets, anyway? He retorted. The elder man undid a button on his shirt, rolling back his shoulders. Fair enough. You want to bring business to me. Who am I to refuse? My violent friend. A bolt of lightning went up his spine, and Rawsuit tilted his head. His host noticed it. Oh, come on. I've been running the pits for 9 years now. How many of your kind do you think I've seen? He huffed a laugh, thick smoke momentarily covering his face. I lost the count from not caring, Mr. Rawsuit, if I ever was honest. And you're simply another face in that pile. Men like you only like violence. Do you know why? He looked at him, very still, because it's the easiest thing to do. He continued, twirling the knife in his hand. So you go about your life, with violence as your creed, until suddenly, one day, you realize that you're all alone. So, what do? He said nothing, as the eyes across his bore into his own. with a cruel smile, you turn on yourself, becoming violent to life itself, hating your existence and desperate for the bittersweet mercy the idea of death offers. Gwadiskvi looked into his eyes. And so, you turn to men like me. Like I said, Mr. Rasut, I recognize people like you. I think you'll find some kindred spirits in here this evening. Try to be merciful to them a little. He finished with a twinkle in his eyes, feeling uncomfortably vulnerable. He rode on a surge of blood and vaulted over the table in a blur, grabbing Gwadiskvi to whirl behind him, the knife now in his hand and held to his host. If you claim to know my motivations so well, then tell me, friend, he spat. Why don't I be a gentleman and grant you some mercy right now? The Mar laughed softly, feeling his own blade digging into his throat. I am trying to be polite, Mr. Rasut. But if you move that knife 1 inch closer to me, I will rip your heart out. Besides, we both know that you'd rather put on an impressive display if you are so adamant on dying. Rasut released him, taking a step back. The pits are crowded tonight, Gwadiskvi remarked, with the eyes of a predator. Our old friend Rihak picked you a good night to fight. The fighting pits had been emptied, and a large area cleared for the closing event of the night. It was sparsely decorated, a handful of oil drums scattered to provide cover, and a few low-hanging bulbs as the only source of light in the wide hall. The crowd was brimming with nervous energy, with people shoving each other for the best spot to view the last fight without falling inside. Rules of the arena were clear. A single step in and you were fair game. The audience silently parted as its supreme benefactor glided through. Aitanpar Gwadiskvi, the man who ran the pits, and every piece of low-life scum that haunted the mines. He raised his arm, holding a glass of exquisite liquor, and the world fell silent. Greetings, children of the pits, he boomed. I have a special night in store for you. The matches till now have offered but a slice of the excitement to come. He looked at those who would fight now, spotting them in the audience. No life is better than half a life. Tonight, the 6 individuals gathered in the arena share more than blood brothers do in a lifetime. They share this thought and are willing to fight to the death to prove it. They are the superior people amongst us, for these men and women have looked into the eyes of desire and stared it down. Riches or luxury, a good, quiet life, that's too much to ask of them. They live for the combat, and for the combat they willingly die. Most of them, anyway. He trailed off. The crowd cheered. The man nodded and continued. We are graced with our weapons master, Mr. Black, offering us the chance to witness his latest wares in action. The crowd went wild, shrieks and whoops filling the air as the said man joined Gvadiskvi, completely decked in black, only parts of his face not covered by his wide-brimmed hat, or sunglasses visible as his lip burst in a cheery laugh. He waved. "Tonight, I bring to you," he started in a deep voice as the crowd went silent, "the only functioning prototypes of my latest gun, a tranquilizer coated with poison from deadly toads, and from my herb garden, highly flammable, although one wouldn't need fire for them to do their job. A slight graze could end a grizzly's life, to say nothing of our own. Up for auction next week." Murmurs streaked across the room as Gvadiskvi continued. "To make it more of a challenge, each of the fighters are equipped with a gun, good for 2 shots. No other weapons. Look closely, for if you blink, you may miss it. But mind your eyes." At a signal, 6 figures stepped in the cleared area. A lithe figure prowled in, carefully eyeing her opponents. The woman had a vicious smile plastered on her face, tracing a finger up her leather-like body armor. "My new guns will go well with the gear." The other woman grunted and flicked her the finger. A thin man slicked a tongue over his teeth, filed into sharp fangs. "You'll see about that, doll." 2 other men staggered inside, either drunk or badly beaten up recently. Rasut was handed his gun as he weighed his options. Oil drums for cover, low-hanging light bulbs, a stale piece of gum in his mouth, and a gun with 2 rounds of poison within. He nodded, taking a deep breath. "In mortality lies my victory. In victory, a worthy death. Till my last breath, the carnage will not stop." He looked up in front of him. The carnage must stop. Tonight, then, death is life. A bell rang without warning, and the crowd roared as slivers of crimson flew all around, spraying up a shower of blood where they struck. He moved in a flash, ducking past a couple of darts and backhanding a light bulb. Those nearest to him flinched, momentarily blinded. Those 2 died first. He shimmied up behind the loud-mouthed girl with the protective gear, swiftly shooting at the unbalanced man across the room. He was dead before he fell, the dart buried in his eye. Grabbing her by the hair, he smashed her nose on the oil drum, and she cried out, instinctively raising a hand to her face. He snaked a hand into the side of her neck and snapped, snatching the gun out of her hands even as her body fell. He ducked as a barrage of darts flew past him. Pressing his back against a drum, Rasut peeked to find the other drunk or injured man already dead, while the man with the razor-sharp teeth wrestled with the bulky woman. Their guns tossed a few feet away. So much for that momentary truce. He spied the light bulb near him, still swinging. He grabbed it with one hand, pulling out the chewing gum with the other, and sticking it on the bulb, recoiling when the hot glass burned his finger. At least this will go quicker than I anticipated, he thought as the glowing bulb twinkled like the stars outside. Damned twinkler. He moved quickly, moving behind another oil drum, as he fired twice at the one directly beneath the bulb, then tossed the dead girl's now empty gun at it for good measure. A thin spray or oil spurted from it, steadily growing into a tiny fountain, leaking oil that quickly spread across the floor. This caught the attention of the woman, who had finished crushing the throat of the thin man and pummeling him to death with her fists. She grinned, going for the two guns at her feet, even as he leaped, and the world froze. In that moment, Rasut saw everything. The horror on Gvediskvi's face, the victory on the woman's, the final moments of the mine as he shot at the light bulb which burst apart, flames engulfing the oil. Boom! The next day, all the papers talked about the mine. Blow up. A gas explosion, they called it. The official report said that no one was around when it happened. No one got hurt. The cleanup crew moved quickly, doing multiple sweeps and gathering what they found before loading the bodies in a truck to be taken away and incinerated. Yet no one noticed a single hand twitching still of the dead man who would still live, outliving his own carnage. No one noticed the mouth speak obscenities and broken whispers, cursing at himself, at the stars, and at life itself. A woman of loose morals. Neha covered her head with the dupatta of her salwar kameez and wrapped it across her shoulder. She put on the oversized black sunglasses borrowed from her roommate, Kavya, who, along with the rest of the second-year students of Kasturba Medical College, was attending the first lecture of the day. Dr. Swami was one of the lenient professors, and students often got away with marking proxy attendance for their friends. As Neha checked the pen drive in her pocket for the 10th time, she prayed that Kavya would successfully mark her proxy attendance today. Her life depended on it. Leaving behind her Honda Activa parked in the hostel parking, Neha hailed an auto rickshaw 100 meters from the college gate. There could be CCTV cameras outside shops in the market where she was headed. Arriving in an auto rickshaw dressed in a plain white salwar kameez with her head covered and most of her face obscured by the oversized sunglasses would make her indistinguishable from the other women walking on the streets. With the auto rickshaw noisily chugging towards the market, Neha fought off a fresh wave of nausea as she recalled the threatening calls and obscene WhatsApp messages she and her friends had been receiving for the past 6 days, while the boys were being threatened with their limbs being hacked off and their eyes ripped out of the sockets. The girls were being terrorized with warnings of brutal rapes and horrifying acid attacks. The message was loud and clear. Withdraw your testimony or face the consequences. Due to fear of backlash and pressure from their families, 10 out of the 12 students had already withdrawn their testimonies, including the boys and girls who had been hospitalized. After all, the right-wing organization they were up against had strong political affiliations and big muscle. In the past few years, the organization members had been accused of vandalism, ransacking, and violence against minorities. But unfortunately, there had been no convictions. The Mangalore city air was heavy with humidity, but Neha felt a fresh chill sweep through her body as she imagined the repercussions for herself and her family if the organization found it was she who provided the incriminating evidence. Her fear was swiftly replaced by sorrow as she recalled the phone conversation with her family 2 days after the incident. I have already spoken to Mathur. Your testimony has been withdrawn, Neha's father had said on the phone. Mr. Mathur was the police commissioner of Mangalore City and an old friend of Neha's father. But Papa, how could you do that? I've been urging all my friends to testify. How can I back out? You will do as you're told. As it is, you've brought shame upon the family. I have brought shame upon the family. A heavy silence had settled on the phone line. Neha could hear her mother admonishing her father in the background. Beta, we care about you. We don't want you to get hurt. Her mother's voice was taut with anxiety. But I'm already hurt, Ma. I'm hurt, and you're asking me to let them go scot-free so that they can keep doing this over and over again. Another pause. Beta, your father has invested a lot of money in your education. You know how much a medical degree costs. I know, Ma, but do not spoil your future. One day, you will get married. Who will marry you knowing that you were involved in this incident? It was the only time in the 19 years of her life that a swear word escaped Neha's lips in front of her parents. Horrified, her mother had returned the phone to her father. If you do not do as you're told, we'll bring you home and get you married. It's your decision. The line had gone dead. Neha retrieved her mobile from her pocket and dialed Karen's number. No response. Again. With a pang of horror, Neha wondered if he had blocked her. I just want to know you're okay, she typed. Call me, please. Neha replaced the phone in her pocket, bracing herself for the next step. The auto rickshaw had reached its destination. Up ahead, Neha could see Ramu's internet cafe, the seedy corner shop at the end of the crowded market. As Neha clutched the pen drive in her pocket and headed towards the internet cafe, all she could hear was the sound of her pounding heart. "6 days ago, never have I ever," paused Raj, the lanky second-year student, of Kasturba Medical College, had 2 girlfriends, or boyfriends, at the same time, as 4 boys and 2 girls brought their glasses to their lips for a drink. Neha sighed. This game was turning out to be duller than she'd imagined. It was either that, or she'd led a pretty boring life up to now, because her drink lay untouched on the table. Neha had never kissed in public. In fact, never kissed at all. Never smoked a cigarette. Never flunked an exam. Never cheated on a test. Never smoked a joint. Never sang or danced in public. Never traveled to a foreign country. Heck, this was the farthest she'd been from her home in New Delhi. So yes, her life had been pretty uneventful. Neha's eyes were drawn again to Karan, sitting across the round table. The colored disco lights from the dance floor brightening his face in all sorts of delightful ways. She wondered what he thought of her, or whether he thought of her at all. He seemed to prefer her company to anyone else's in college, and he often blushed in a childlike, innocent way whenever she caught him staring at her. But did he love her the way she loved him? 2 waiters appeared at their table, carrying plates of steaming paneer tikka, juicy chicken tikka, and colorful vegetable platters. The 12 hungry teenagers devoured the food within minutes and ordered another round of snacks. The game resumed with Priya, a portly girl with a shrill voice declaring, "Never have I ever been in love." Sounds faded and sights blurred as Neha's universe shrunk to the space between Karen's eyes. Those gorgeous brown eyes that were looking right at her and conveying feelings that neither of them had been able to express. As though mirroring each other's actions, Neha and Karan lifted their glasses and sipped their drinks, all the while looking at each other. Finishing his drink in a single gulp, Karan excused himself and went towards the exit of the pub. Taking a cue, Neha followed him outside, passing by a group of 30-something-year-olds with children's birthday caps balanced precariously on their heads, gyrating to Badshah's Abi to Party Shuru Hui Hai. The party has just begun. On the dance floor, Neha found Karan in the parking outside, leaning against his Maruti Swift, a lit cigarette in his hand. "All okay?" she asked, approaching him. "All good," he said, smiling. "So, are you enjoying your first party?" It was a running joke among her classmates that how Neha Kapoor, the supreme nerd, had artfully avoided all parties in the first year of college and focused solely on her studies, while the rest of her classmates had spent every weekend in a drunken stupor. "It's not so bad," she said. Karan chuckled. "It won't kill you to admit you're having a blast." The 3 drinks she'd had before they started playing the awful game dominated her senses. Neha wondered whether his lips had always been so full and red and juicy looking, or had she been blind the entire last year. Neha felt his hand on her arm, the pressure maddeningly exciting. His face was tantalizingly close to hers, and she could smell the cigarette on his breath. Wait a minute. Was he pushing her away? You're drunk. Let's get you something to eat, shall we? His voice seemed to be coming from just away, and as Neha followed him inside, she realized with a pang of mortification that she'd just tried to kiss him, and he'd pushed her away. Neha cursed silently as she took her seat at the table, avoiding looking in the direction she'd been looking all evening. She nudged her friend Kavya, sitting next to her. "Meet me in the bathroom," she whispered. Kavya peered at her friend in the semi-darkness of the pub. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, I just need to talk." Taking extreme care to look anywhere but at him, Neha ambled towards the bathroom, wishing she could disappear. She pushed open the door with the Queen of Hearts sign hanging on it and entered the empty ladies' bathroom. Roughly, she splashed some water on her face and gaped at her reflection in the mirror. 3 drinks, and she'd transformed into a girl who tried to kiss a boy in public, a boy who wasn't even her boyfriend. And the headache, oh, the mighty headache building up behind her eyes. She should have stopped at 1 drink. The whole party experience was so overrated. Neha wasn't sure she'd ever go to another party. What was that? Neha closed the tap and listened attentively. Somebody, a man, was yelling in the local language, and she couldn't understand a word. No, it was more than one man shouting. Loud, angry voices coming from just outside the bathroom door. The music stopped abruptly. The voices grew louder. What was going on? Before Neha could reach the door, a girl's scream pierced the air, sending a chill down her spine. With trembling, cold hands, Neha pushed open the door and peered through the tiny crack. The bright lights hurt her eyes. A group of 25 men, all in a high state of excitement, had barged into the pub and encircled her friends, their faces convoluted in fury. These young men were hollering at the teenagers in a language she couldn't understand while making aggressive, threatening gestures. All Neha could catch were the words drinking, smoking, girls, and loose morals. The second-year male students had formed a circle around the 4 girls, who huddled together in the center, terrified, while the group of belligerent men hurled abuses at them. Neha watched in horror as one of the men punched Karan on the nose. He stumbled backwards, holding his bleeding nose. It was at that precise moment that pandemonium erupted, with first flying through the air, crushing and snapping and breaking bones, a congealed mass of humanity, shoving and yelling and crying, heads and limbs sticking out at grotesque angles. Neha tore her gaze away to look for the staff of the pub, the manager, somebody who could help, but there was nobody in sight. The older partygoers seemed to have fled, leaving the teenagers at the mercy of these ghouls, trying to be inconspicuous. Neha hunkered low on the floor and dialed Mather Uncle's number. with shaky hands. It was 11:05 p.m. Mathur uncle picked up on the third ring. "Neha, is everything okay?" His voice was alert and tense. Clearly, the call had been unexpected. Neha relayed everything as clearly and precisely as she could. "I'm dispatching units right away. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Lock the door. Stay in the bathroom." Neha closed her eyes, teardrops running down her cheeks. Her friends were being beaten to a pulp by these fanatics, and all she'd done was make a phone call while hiding in the bathroom, like the coward that she was. The screams were piercing her eardrums, firing bolts of agony to her brain. She couldn't just sit here and wait. She had to do something. But what could she do? If she went outside, she would get beaten up too. How could she help then? Neha glanced at her sneakers, grateful she wasn't wearing heels, and turned on her phone's camera. She opened the bathroom door and pressed record. The longer Neha witnessed the dastardly act, the more she felt infuriated and emboldened. She stepped out of the bathroom in her black, knee-length dress and her red sneakers, zooming in on the face of each attacker one by one. The girls had been yanked away from the boys and were being slapped and dragged by their hair by a group of 10 men who had surrounded them. On the other side, the boys were being brutally kicked and punched by another group. Neha drifted towards the exit of the pub while continuing to record the ghastly events. When she was sure she had captured every man's face on camera, Neha put her phone away and whistled loudly. Some men turned around and spotted her. They began yelling at each other. "Catch me if you can, assholes!" With these words, Neha turned on her heels and sped towards the exit of the pub. A group of men dashed after her, breaking the circle around the girls, who pushed the rest of the men out of their way and hurried to the exit. Fear pumped through Neha's veins like adrenaline, propelling her through the parking and towards the main road, deserted at this time of the night. 15 men were chasing her, bellowing and cursing and making obscene gestures. Neha wasn't sure how long she could outrun them or where she could go. Her college was 6 kilometers away, and even if she ran all that distance, she didn't think her pursuers would stop at the gate as Neha turned left at a traffic signal. She could hear the police siren blaring, and just a moment later, the headlights of 2 police jeeps blinded her. She paused and spun around to see that the men had stopped, turned 180 degrees, and were now running away from her and the police jeeps. The fusty, windowless cubicle of the internet cafe contained a bulky monitor hooked to a CPU, at least 10 years old. As Neha plugged in the pen drive, her mobile began to ring. "Karan, where are you? Are you okay?" she said breathlessly, an ominous pause. "Neha, I'm okay. Listen carefully. I called to say goodbye," he said in a hoarse voice. What? What happened? My parents have transferred me to another medical college in another city. Why? Where are you going? I can't say. Look, I'm sorry. Just stay away from this whole business, okay? It's the only way to stay safe. These people... His voice trailed off. Karan, I have to go now. Goodbye, Neha. The line went dead. Neha stared at her mobile, feeling like the whole world was spinning beneath her. A news app on her mobile flashed a news report about a statement by the founding member of the right-wing organization that had attacked them 6 days ago. These girls come from all over the country. Drink, smoke, and walk around in the night, spoiling the traditional girls of the city. Why should girls go to pubs? Are they going to serve their future husbands alcohol? Should they not be learning how to make rotis, Indian bread? Pubs and bars should be for men only. We wanted to make sure that all the women in the city are home by 7 p.m. Neha gaped at her phone in mute disbelief. The computer screen prompted her to create a new account. It was the anonymous account through which she intended to upload the video and broadcast it. Neha brought her hands to the keyboard and began typing the account name. A woman of loose morals.
Aç, teslim alsam.
Tita, author's note. To read about the true events that inspired this story, search for Mangalore pub attack. Sadly, the 26 men charged with the assault walked free due to lack of evidence, despite the assault being caught on camera. The dark night. A shadow of a figure was running in the dark. All around were tall trees, and only a small fraction of the moon's rays got through the canopy. The ground was a black void, with no difference between the dirt and the tree roots. A pack of wolves howled in the distance. With every gust of wind, the tree branches and leaves banged and rustled like a toddler playing with pots and pans. Under all of that was a low mumble, rhythmic, like a drum cadence, but ghostly in origin. The figure trips. Eli. The scene quakes. Eli. The moon disappeared. Elijah. Blinding fluorescent light replaced the words. 13-year-olds Eli and Tyler were sitting in the mall food court, eating dinner across from each other. Eli's heart was pounding in his ears, and his hands trembled. Tyler put her hands on his. Eli, what did you see? Eli repeatedly blinked back at her as the fog lifted from his head. I don't really know. Come on, she said, slinging on a side bag as she raised from her chair. You can think about it on our way home. I don't want to miss the bus. Without a word, Eli cleaned up their table and carried the tray away. As soon as his hand was free, he reached for her hand. They walked away from the tables, with Tyler locking her arm from Eli's swinging. Not too many people were left in the mall. There were a few stragglers around the pop-up stands, but most were lacing their arms through jacket sleeves by the exits. However, two men, a twig-like one with close to the head African curls, and a log-like one with slicked hair, mostly to one side, didn't fit in either group. They stood off the side, away from everyone else, surveilling, looking for something. Their cookies and cream vibe didn't make Tyler divert their path. She was right until they stepped into their way. "Excuse us, Tyler Woodlock and Elijah Krieger?" the twig one asked through a British accent. Tyler pulled Eli closer. "No, sorry," she answered, starting to walk around them, with her and Eli's fingers turning red. "Government agents?" The other man stopped them, flipping open his budget case. "Miss Woodlock." The Brit slid closer as Tyler gave out a nervous laugh. She pulled it together with a devious smirk. "All right, agents." She stepped closer. "But one thing first." "Yes," the man said, putting his budget back. Tyler gave the Brit, the fitter one, a stiff kick in the shin. With him on the floor and his partner stunned, she yelled, "Run, Eli," giving Eli a push start. Eli sprinted off, getting a head start as Tyler toppled over a supply case. He headed for the loading docks, a path Tyler forced him to memorize for an emergency like this. As ordered, he ran without looking back. He nearly ran off the truck port in his mindset. He jumped down. Falling on his hands, he looked like a frog. He couldn't find the strength to stand, but he walked, half crawled, to the rear of the building. Collapsing against the brick, he took his chance to look back. She wasn't there. He stayed twisted around the corner, waiting for Tyler. All of a sudden, bright light beamed onto him. Drawing Eli's attention, the voice called out, "Stay there!" They boomed like a drill sergeant. He clambered to his feet and did the total opposite as the voice commanded. A stampede of boots followed Eli as he jotted into the wooded area on the other side of the loading lane. The fall night grew darker as he was chased farther in the woods. With every gust of wind, the tree branches and leaves banged and rustled. Their movement shifted and blocked the moon as if in a game of peekaboo. This and the uneven ground made Eli bobble like a pinball. The voice rang out again. "Get him! Don't let him get away." It allured him to look back. A light show of flashlights was going on behind. Even with all the light, however, the people remained shadows. A gopher tunnel tripped Eli up a bit. As he looked up, a pair of amber eyes, low to the ground, stared at him from a few yards away. The progression of howls following the encounter made Eli run fast. He couldn't hear the boots anymore. He would turn his head a few degrees before forcing it straight. The last one sent him flying into the ground. Tyler peered over a row of bushes. Eli laid on the ground, with only his chest moving up and down. As soon as she raised from her position, two men came into view. One went to Eli's side, and the other pulled out a radio. Asset found, about 4 clicks due east of the loading dock. The radio guy looked around the perimeter as the second man searched Eli's pocket. Tyler fished around in her bag. In the dark, the inside of her bag was a void. She felt cold metal as more men appeared. The one left Eli's side. "The cards aren't here, sir." Eli let at a moan as he began to stir. "Bring him. We'll find out soon enough where they are." He turned and started the procession away. Radio and Pocket Man gave each other a glance before Pockets threw Eli over his shoulder. The remaining men followed. Tyler took her hand out of her back. She fell to her knees, with her hands on her face. As the first tears started falling, she wiped them away with her fists clenched. She ran back to the mall, heading towards the parking lot. Her head bubbled back and forth, looking at the cars and people. Losing her structure, she fell back on her knees. She started crying again, right before her ears perked up. Snapping her head around, she saw the 2 agents from inside. "We lost, ma'am," she heard the agent who threw his badge in her face. They were ready to run. A grin grew across her face. She spined back, with her attention being grabbed by the rear of the car she fell in front of. The license read, CA exempt 387690. She had seen enough of those when the police raided their Romanov dwellings. The odds of that being their car, she didn't know. Not did she know the odds of them automatically unlocking it far enough away that she could climb into the trunk before they were close enough to see. The 2 agents and their unknown guest arrived at their motel on the outskirts of town almost an hour after Eli was taken. The building wasn't too big, just 2 rows with 8 or so doors each. Behind each were a single room and a bath. The agents went first. Tyler waited until she couldn't hear them anymore before pushing out the back row cushion. Sitting on the floor of the car, she watched as they entered a room with the number 6 on the door. She opened the door carefully so she wouldn't hit the next car. In the same manner, she closed it without a sound. She strategically stepped as she reached back into her bag. After peering into the room's window, she saw the 2 agents with their backs to the door. There seemed to be nothing but a wall in front of them. But that didn't bother Tyler. She walked right in and pulled her hand out of her bag before slamming the door shut. The agents jumped if shots had been fired. They found that they weren't too far off. Dropping their phone, they were face to face with a gun barrel. "Hello again, miss." "Woodlock," one agent said through his British accent as they snuck for their weapons. "Don't patronize me," she said, cocking her gun. "Do you think you can pull yours before I shoot the both of you? I've already proved I have grace under pressure." They both bring their hands forward. "What do you want?" the other one asked. "Well, Agent Vincent Petrov, I'm thinking about a trade." Flaunting his arrogant British accent, he asked. What would you have that we would? Cutting him off, Tyler pulled out a deck of tarot cards. Really, I might be a child, but I'm not an idiot. That still doesn't answer my question, Vincent said. I want Eli back. Excuse me. Even if I believe for a second you're not with the men who took him, you bring him back to me, and you get these no-so-meaningless cards, and we all live happily ever after. The agents gave each a glance. Let me make this easier. You do this, or I shoot you, and go on my merry way. Eli was groggy, teetering between awake and asleep for the car ride, though no one could tell through the blindfold, nor from his position in the trunk. They had tried his wrists and ankles to stop the little fight he had in him. No kicking, no hitting, no running. More helpless than he was without Tyler. He was asleep when the car stopped, but was jarred awake when one of the men yanked him out. Being bobbled around, his face was red and breathed deeply, trying to keep dinner in. The only relief came when he was dropped to the floor. After the bang of the door, Eli was left to wait once more in the dark. He pulled at his ropes, only stopping when the burning turned into paper-cut sensations. No closer to freedom, he crumbled, stopped straining, stopped fighting, stopped holding it together. Back at the motel, Tyler sat crisscrossed on the first bed from the door, yanking her locket back and forth on its chain. She stared at the agents that sat on the other side of the room. She tried to hear what they were saying, but they put the same effort into the opposite. What are we going to do, Miles? Vincent asked. Play the game. Easier said than done. We know when, where, and a fair idea of how. The who is what scares me. I would be more scared of the lass if we don't. I agree with Agent Walker. A woman, dressed in a white skirt suit with her dark hair in a spiral braid, said just inside the room. Ms. Isles? Vincent jumped out of his seat. Tyler did the same. She stared at the woman, jotting a glance at the door, then back. No one heard the door open or closed. Hello, miss. Woodlock, Ms. Isles said, raising her hand. Hi, Tyler said, more like a question than snipe, without shaking her hand. Well, do you want the good news or the bad news? Good would be best, Vincent toddled. Isles looked at Tyler. Find the boy. Bring him back. Finish your original mission, she said through a smile. She began to walk away. She already had her hand on the doorknob before any of them stopped her. What about the bad news? Miles shouted. Work with her, Walker. Work with her, she said, leaving before and without argument. Eli had no idea how long he was asleep for, but when he opened his eyes, he was met with a blinding light. He stretched out to find his legs and arms unbound. Panicked, enjoyed, he shuddered and jostled. He missed the hand on the wrist. A shadow eclipsed the bright light. Do you mind not moving? The voice sounded familiar. With the light masked, Eli could start to see the room. First, the man kneeling in front of him, graying hair, flannel button-up shirt and placid blue eyes. Then small red spots on the gray cement floor. And last, white bandage roll, some on his right wrist, and the man wrapping more onto his left. "I think you've bled enough on my floor for today," the man said, finishing his work. "Your floor? Don't be put off by the casual dress. I'm the boss here, and that's why I can offer you this. You answer all my questions, and you can go home to your gypsy family, to your sweet wife, Tyler, without any more harm." "What do you want to know?" Eli asked as he sat up. "Why don't we start with something simple? Why did you run away from me at the loading docks?" said the man who blared a flashlight in Eli's eyes earlier that night. Vincent sat at the small two-person table, glaring at a street map and a calculator. "How is it going, Vince?" Miles asked, leaning over Vincent's shoulder. "Not great. Knowing that they took Elijah 75 minutes ago, and assuming they stayed within 5 miles per hour of the speed limit, they can be anywhere within and around 50 miles away from the mall. That's a big area. We don't know the half of it." "Miss Woodlock! Tyler!" she yelled at him. "My name's Tyler." "Tyler." He put his hands up halfway. "Can you give us anything? Car model? Direction? Anything?" "I was a little busy, trying not to get caught myself. Trying to find you fools. If we try to search all of this..." Vincent pulled Miles closer and lowered his voice. "We won't get to him in time." "Don't talk like that," Tyler yelled, with a little cry behind it. "You start talking like that, and things will end that way." She fell back onto the bed, with her hands on her face. Miles glared down at Vincent, with his arms crossed. He kept that position as he walked over to the bed. Sitting next to her, he put his arm around her, with an air bubble between them. "Thanks," she said, whipping her hands out from her face. "It's getting late. Why don't you rest for a bit? We don't want our sharpshooter's eyes heavy. I've been one for the last 10 years. But..." She paused, bringing up her watch on her right wrist. "Watch," she continued, jumped off the bed. "What?" Miles followed her towards Vincent. "Watch." She started searching her bag. "I got Eli a watch for our first anniversary. He never takes it off." She presented the watch's instructions. "And it has GPS. Anniversary?" they asked. During their time together, the man asked Eli an array of questions. Most about trivial personal things to get Eli relaxed and uncoil from his balled-up position. It was working, too. He was as relaxed as if he was home. His eyes glassed over as the questions droned on. The room faded away. A dark place appeared. A spotlight shines on the center. A glint of metal moved in from the bottom. A gun, revolver, a white hand, a flannel sleeve. The hand snapped the bullet holder back into the gun. It aimed. Destroying the image, the shot fired caused Eli to scream and hold his ear. His ears were still ringing when the man tried to calm him down. Eli saw what he expected was on his own face. on the man's. The man removed Eli's hands. His mouth moved, but Eli couldn't hear it. He yanked himself away. "Why are you asking me all these questions? What do you want?" The man had a blank face. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. After straightening his shirt, he said, "You have something that belongs to me." "I don't have anything." Eli shuddered. "Not now, but..." He exhaled heavily through his nose. "Tyler gave you something. A set of tarot cards." "I don't know where they are," he stuttered. "Well, it's the last question you have to answer, so give it a good thought. They could be anywhere. In the woods where you chased. Back in the mall where the other two did. With," he said, trying to put the brakes in his mouth. "So, you know where they are." No, I don't." "Yes, you do." He pulled a gun from his back waistband. "Tell me." Eli's mouth opened, but the only crashing noises came. The sound made both of them jot their attention towards the door. The man gritted his teeth. The other two. Staring down at his gun, he weighed it in his hand before bringing it down on Eli's head. Eli fell to the floor again. The last thing he saw before the backs of his eyelids was the man's black shoes walking out the door. The black gave away to wisps, at first merging into cacti and sand. They whirled by through the view from a car window. Tyler sat on the opposite side, smiling back. In the front seat sat Miles and Vincent. The whole picture felt loving and had a dream-like glow. It faded into a face full of fabric. Before he could freak out like his earlier ones, a hand touched his shoulder. "You're all right now. You're safe," Tyler cooed. In a quick movement, Eli raised to hug her, nearly bringing them to the floor. Regaining her structure, she hugged back. In their embrace, Eli missed Miles and Vincent standing off to the side, smiling down at them. The big crime investigators at the Gustav Adolf Lutheran Church in New Sweden, Maine. In 2003, a mass poisoning there sickened more than a dozen congregants, killing one. Credit: Joel Page, Associated Press, by The New York Times, April 7th, 2020. All true crime stories start as crime reporting, often in the daily newspaper. Before the narrative is shaped for your streaming device, earbuds, or bookshelf, the facts are gathered by a journalist. What happened? Where and when? Who is the victim? And do the police know who did it? Any journalist who has covered crime has stories they can't shake. These tales can be harrowing, bizarre, or even, in rare circumstances, oddly inspirational. We asked our journalists to share the ones they still think about, even decades later. Ellen, Barry, Boston, bureau chief. Someone put arsenic in the coffee after a church service in New Sweden, Maine, sickening several congregants and killing one. I was sent up there in 2003 by the Boston Globe to the far reaches of Aroostook County. It was both quaint and horrific. Someone trying to kill their neighbors. Eventually, it emerged that one of the ushers had done it as revenge for losing a theological battle. As the population in that area drained away, two small Lutheran churches were consolidated into one. Identical to outsiders, the two churches had what was for them a deeply significant doctrinal difference. In one, the priest faced the congregation when blessing the host. In the other, the priest faced the altar. The poisoner had lost that battle. He ultimately killed himself. It was a grim story about the dilemmas of those stretches of our country that are losing population, having to let go of their particular identity, have a true crime story to share. Tell us about the crime that haunts your memory. Feb 27, 2020. Linda Richardson, Senior Staff Editor. Travel. Eddie Brown began running in a snake-infested Florida swamp in 1952. In the 44 years after he escaped from a chain gang while serving a robbery sentence, Mr. Brown worked, raised children, and lived quietly in East New York. But he was always shadowed by the gnawing fear that his past would catch up with him. I covered his case as a Metro reporter in 1996. But lately, I've been thinking a lot about the chain gang fugitive, having recently read about the racial horrors of the Jim Crow South in Colson Whitehead's The Nickel Boys. Eddie Brown's past resurfaced after he was in a minor car accident, and the police ran a routine check that showed he was wanted in Florida. He was taken away in handcuffs. Florida initially requested his extradition, and New York law enforcement officials began the proceedings. Mr. Brown spent nearly 40 days in the Brooklyn House of Detention before he was released on $1,000 bail. It was an immensely satisfying moment to see him walk out of the courthouse, finally a free man, as a sea of news photographers with flashing cameras and reporters, more than I've ever seen, awaited him. Dig deeper into the moment. Special offer. Subscribe for $1 a week. Dan Barry, domestic correspondent. When I worked for the Providence Journal many years ago, I often wrote about the mobsters who were very much present in that Rhode Island city. You knew that this was Social Club, this was Baby Shanks's Cafe, and this was the place where Old Man, the boss, used to run everything. You also knew that two men connected to a certain restaurant had made a guy named Joe Onions disappear long ago, but had never revealed where they had laid him to rest. Fast forward to 2008. One of the men is dead, and the other is dying. The police pick him up on a nickel and dime charge and ask for the umpteenth time, where is Joe Onions buried? To their shock, he agrees to spill. I have strong ties still to the state, and when I heard about this case, it sounded like a short story. about an old wise guy who decides to go out by doing the right thing. I had to write it. Nicholas, domestic correspondent, investigations. The century-old department store stands 8 stories tall, but looms even larger in the German consciousness. A short walk from the old New York Times bureau, where I worked in West Berlin. The luxurious shopping destination is a symbol both of Berlin's roaring 20s and the country's post-war economic miracle. So when I learned that there had been a jewelry heist, with the thieves caught on the surveillance camera, lowering themselves into the store on a rope ladder, evading the motion detectors, and making off with millions of dollars worth of jewels, I knew it was a big crime story on the biggest stage. My contacts in the Berlin Police Department told me that the thieves had made just one mistake, leaving behind a glove at the scene with DNA inside. A good story needs a twist, but a great story boasts two. The DNA evidence led not to a single suspect, but a pair, identical twins, identified as 27-year-old Hassan and Abbas O. The German justice system couldn't lock them both up, and each could claim the other did it. So, they walked. It may not have been the perfect crime, but it was a pretty sweet alibi. Alan Reporter. Metro. A Bronx man spent 25 years in prison for a rape he did not commit. Why? Because a witness accidentally took the police to the wrong apartment, one and not 16. And the police arrested and prosecuted the man they found there. Fernandez, Houston, Bureau Chief. One night in 2006, a police officer in the Bronx responds to a fight at a White Castle. He rolls up and sees a man with a gun kneeling over another man in the parking lot. He tells the gunman to drop the weapon, but the gunman doesn't respond. The officer opens fire, and the gunman is critically wounded and later dies. The gunman, it turns out, was a fellow officer, an off-duty Bronx policeman who was intoxicated and had just been beaten up by a group of guys at the White Castle. It's the mistaken identity that gets me. You can freeze frame the shooting as the bullets in the air and study it. There are worlds upon worlds of fate, mystery, and human connection at play. These two officers worked at station houses nearly 2 miles apart, and yet here they were, drawn together in a few tense, confusing seconds in a fast food parking lot. As I wrote, in this city, people live their whole lives separated by such short distances and never once cross paths. I don't think the officer was ever prosecuted for the shooting. I think it was ruled a justified shooting. But how does a cop live with a thing like that and move on? Yes, 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 yes. Armando, Deputy Editorial Director, Syndication. Hi, 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 hi. This unsolved case, in which 7 people, including children, were shot point blank during a robbery inside a bowling alley has been a cloud over a small New Mexico city near the Mexican border for decades. 4 of the victims were killed. A 12-year-old victim, shot in the head, managed to call 911. And no arrests have ever been made. I grew up in the area, and it has been a source of sorrow and local mythology ever since it happened in 1990. In fact, the brutality of this crime over a few $1,000s, the massive law enforcement response, and the fact that no credible witnesses have ever come forward to identify suspects, all we want to hear about a crime that haunts you, a story that shook you, your town or community, and possibly changed lives. We are starting a project that will deeply examine crimes around the United States. The kinds of stories that too often go untold or have largely been forgotten. The crimes can be solved or unsolved, decades in the past or more recent. The crime may have been violent or involved financial or political wrongdoings. It may have implicated law enforcement or corporations. We're particularly interested in stories that may have gotten local coverage or not, but didn't rise to national consciousness. Rainer Kelly's murder soulmate. People are fools. This was a thought he'd held on to since he was a boy, and it had held true for his entire life till that point. Even as Rainer drove on the roads of his favorite mountain range, he could only think back to the sorts who proved it to him. Those sorts of people he couldn't even be angry at. The kind of idiots that got themselves lost in his favorite places. It wasn't as if he cared for any particular demographic. He liked to hurt them more if they were pretty, more so if they were tame. But he was always one for opportunity. That might have been how he managed his body count. Serial killers without a known type are harder to catch, as far as he'd heard. Though, considering how high the body counts were for easier cases, he had his reservations. It could have been how he killed. While he wasn't exactly messy, he didn't try to be fancy with his targets. He'd done it before. Long, drawn moments with strangers in discreet, abandoned places. But when all was said and done, he was careful. That, and he was a fairly big guy. He was a hard man to escape. Made his marks all the more foolish for trusting him. It wasn't all that late when he happened upon his next mark. A young man, inching to it, really, with a lovely mop of hair just by the side of the road. "Hello, sir. I kinda sprained my ankle. Could you drive me to a gas station or something?" the kid asked softly. He looked embarrassed by the entire situation. Rainer liked that, so he opened his passenger door for him. The kid was asking, after all. He watched as the kid arranged himself on the passenger side, careful to buckle himself in. The kid seemed a mite more cautious now, considering his ankle. Rainer started after that, taking his merry time since the kid wasn't worrying directions. "So, what had you so far out?" Rainer asked with a sideways glance. The kid had been looking out the window, contemplating something, before glancing over to him. "Oh, nothing much. Just the scenery," the boy said. "Is it all right if I do some writing here?" "I don't exactly have a charging setup," Rainer said, still playing the Samaritan. The kid took out a small journal. "Sorry to disappoint. I'm a bit old school," he said, trying to look cool. He kinda did if Rainer were at all honest. Rainer could have driven with his eyes closed, but he still only looked over occasionally, seeing the kid scribble away on a relatively clean page in his book. "So, what do you like to write about?" "Bodies." "Oh, what kind of bodies?" he asked innocuously. "Anybody, anything." "Oh," he said, hoping for something more specific. It was well enough that the kid was mostly quiet after that. Rainer wasn't so over-curious of this next body. Couldn't be that clever this far out. Didn't stop him from being a bit disappointed with the answer, what they were, rather than the state they were in. He was still a bit mesmerized with the kid, scratching away on a half-empty journal he was never gonna fill. He wondered, like any man oughta, how the kid managed to see anything past his fringe. But it seemed weird to impose on something like that. That mop would be safe enough to cut when the kid was dead, if he was really in the mood for a trophy. Beyond that, it was the kinda night he wanted to take slowly. The kid was marked for it. Rainer liked to take it slow sometimes. "I still gotta wonder what got you out so late." "I thought I told you." "Oh, whatever," the kid whispered, before asking, "Is it all right to say I've got terrible friends?" "Well, hey, we've all been in bad crowds before," Rainer stated. He liked getting him out of the shell before the fun. "Yeah." Rainer couldn't see where the kid was looking. "I don't think I caught your name." "No, you didn't." "Be fair, I didn't catch yours either." "Ah, I'm Callum. Let me guess. Your mom had a thing for soap operas?" "No, saints, actually," the kid corrected with a laugh. "My mom had a thing for cryptids." Rainer paused at the non sequitur, thinking over what to say. He could be honest, tell the kid his name, hear that begging catch on his throat later. Or he could lie, make him guess. "It won't matter if I don't know your real name, you know," the kid said, catching his apprehension. Rainer stopped to think about where they were, where the closest safe house was, before saying, "No, I was just surprised. I'm Rainer Kelly." Because he liked the kid's voice. The kid was quiet after that, the only noise from the passenger side being the press of pencil to paper, the sound of a zipper. Then, as if struck by something, he felt a sharp presence through his leg, reacting with a hit to the face, which knocked the kid out. Without much thought as to the proper thing to do, Rainer pulled the knife out. Rainer felt his own hot blood flow from his thigh, and all he could think was, "The little maniac stabbed me." He looked down at his leg, realizing that the kid, with all the luck, nicked something proper. He stole the kid's belt, since he was still out, and made a tourniquet. Frazzled by the entire ordeal, he decided to push the kid out the passenger side and step it to the nearest hospital. A night held up in the emergency room was an interesting addition to his night, just as the injury to his femoral artery was. It was a lucky break, not dying from it. But the kid was still out there. He'd done something foolish. And while Rainer wasn't especially scared of getting caught, he didn't like being blindsided like that. It would be a while after that before he'd think of it again. When he cleaned out his car, Rainer, having killed on the go before, knew that anything could drop from a body. Licenses, gum, IDs, and phones were some of the most incriminating. So he really couldn't afford to keep a dirty car. That's when he found the journal, the last thing the kid dropped before trying to get the drop on him. It was a small, leather-bound notebook, and while at once familiar in the light of day, he could see the character of its use. Kid was careful closing it before pulling that nonsense. And while his car had been a mess for a while, the pages were mostly clean. He flipped through, looking for IDs that might incriminate. And when he couldn't find any, he thought to throw it away, even without something concrete. The book was filled with the kid's writings, and being by hand, his composition and identity could be ascertained. It was the kinda circumstantial evidence detectives and juries ate up. With the car no longer in disarray, he could throw it out, forget about the one night where the tables almost turned altogether again. He thought of the journal, of his hands and head. This was all he was gonna have of that. And for once, amongst the dark thoughts and bad memories, he wanted to keep it. It was only then did he read it, page upon page of poetry. And though it was the simplest thing it could be, he was infatuated with it. The first page, dated a decade before, I am beauty. I am soft, a crooked rumble to strange human love. She wonders fondly, where are you, dear? While I am dry and rotting here, I am claws. I am fear, a hissing mess to his cruel intent. I am flesh. I am bones. The kid was killing cats back then, writing poetry about it even. Rainer was taken back to his first experiments, neighborhood pets, and the like he dispatched out of curiosity. Though the kid never wrote his age or full name in any of them, he could tell that it was quite a bit more than poetry. It was something he'd never thought to do. Write about them with this intense distance. Some were short and recent. I am small. I am buzzing. My life is sweet. My stripes are fuzzy. Inside, I'm soft. My stingers not. None are things the dead can flaunt. Before he knew it, he felt familiar with the kid, like he was more than a liability, as close as a journal scratched halfway through. It really was anything, anybody, to him. I am lovely. I am strong. My tendons were cut. My fat is gone, lost beneath 2 or 3 feet. There are no feelings the dead get to keep. Rainer thinks, reading through Callum's poetry book, about that night and how it went. Every little lie that he didn't bother telling. How ready he was after saying his name. He wonders, what'll I do when I'm on the prowl again? Hungry for new pretty faces. How long before he thinks about the kid as just a liability again, and not the one that got away?